A parking attendant grabbed my arm and told me not to get in my car, and the look on his face told me something was very wrong. It was a Thursday night, just past 7 in the evening. I had stayed late at work to finish a project, and the parking garage was almost empty by the time I walked down from my office. My heels echoed against the concrete as I made my way to the third level where I always parked. I had my keys in one hand and my phone in the other, scrolling through messages without really paying attention. I was maybe 20 feet from my car when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and saw Raymond, the parking attendant who had worked in this garage for as long as I could remember. He was in his early 60s, a kind man with gray hair and a warm smile. He always wished me good night when I left. He always told me to drive safe, but tonight, he wasn't smiling. "Miss Brennan, stop," he said, holding up his hand. "Don't go near your car." I froze. "What? Why?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked past me toward my vehicle, a silver Honda Civic parked in the same spot I used every single day. He crouched down slowly, putting one hand on the ground for balance, and looked underneath. When he stood up, his face had gone pale. He pulled out his phone and dialed 3 numbers. His voice was calm, but firm when he spoke. "This is Raymond Gibbs at the Morrison Street parking structure. I need police here right now. There's someone hiding under a woman's car." My whole body went cold. I looked down at my car, at the shadow beneath it, and for the first time, I saw what Raymond had seen. A shape that shouldn't be there. The outline of a person, pressed flat against the concrete, waiting. "Step back, Miss Brennan," Raymond said quietly. "Step back and stay behind me." I couldn't move. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare at the shadow under my car and wonder how long he had been there. How long he had been waiting for me to walk up, unlock my door, and give him the chance to do whatever he had planned. If Raymond hadn't stopped me, I would have walked right into it. Subscribe for more stories, and tell me where you're watching from. My name is Sasha Brennan. I'm 28 years old, and until that night in the parking garage, I thought I had my life under control. I work as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized advertising firm in downtown Milwaukee. It's not my dream job, but it pays well and keeps me busy. I've been there for 3 years, long enough to know everyone's name and have my own coffee mug in the break room. My office is on the 14th floor of a glass building with views of the city that almost make the long hours worth it. I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes from work. It's small but comfortable, with a balcony just big enough for a single chair and a few potted plants. I moved there after I graduated from college, and I've stayed because the rent is reasonable, and the neighbors mind their own business. My family is scattered but close. My older sister, Marin, lives in Chicago with her husband and 2 young daughters. We talk every Sunday night without fail, catching up on the week, complaining about work, laughing about nothing important. My parents, Frank and Deborah, retired to Florida 2 years ago. They call me more often than I call them, which I always feel guilty about. I keep meaning to visit, but something always comes up. 8 months before that night in the garage, I ended a relationship that should have ended much sooner. His name was Dustin. We met at a friend's birthday party and dated for almost 2 years. At first, he was everything I thought I wanted. Charming, attentive, the kind of guy who remembered small details and showed up with flowers for no reason. But somewhere along the way, things changed. He started getting upset when I spent time with friends. He wanted to know where I was at all times. He checked my phone when he thought I wasn't looking. He made comments about my clothes, my coworkers, the way I talked to other men. Little things at first, easy to dismiss. But the little things added up until I couldn't breathe anymore. When I finally broke up with him, he didn't take it well. He showed up at my apartment twice after I ended things. The first time, he said he just wanted to talk, to understand what went wrong. I let him in because I felt guilty, and he stayed for 2 hours, crying, begging me to give him another chance. The second time, he came in the middle of the night to return some of my things. I didn't let him inside, but seeing him standing in the hallway at 2 a.m. scared me more than I wanted to admit. I told him to stop contacting me. I told him it was over, and I needed him to respect that. He sent a few more text messages over the next couple of weeks, some angry, some apologetic. Then, eventually, he went quiet. I wanted to believe he had moved on. I needed to believe it, because the alternative was too frightening to consider. My daily routine became predictable again. I went to work, came home, watched TV, called my sister on Sundays. I parked in the same spot on the third level of the Morrison Street garage every single day. I walked to my car alone every evening, keys in hand, never thinking twice about it. Raymond, the parking attendant, was a constant presence in that routine. He had worked in that garage for as long as I had been parking there, maybe longer. He knew everyone by name. He remembered my birthday because I mentioned it once, 3 years ago, and he wished me a happy birthday every year after that. He was the kind of person who made you feel safe without ever making a big deal about it. I didn't know how much I had taken that feeling for granted until the night Raymond stopped me from walking to my car, until I saw the shadow underneath and realized that the man I thought had moved on had been watching me for weeks, planning, waiting. Dustin hadn't moved on at all. He had been there the whole time, and I never saw him coming. The police arrived within 5 minutes of Raymond's call. 2 squad cars pulled into the garage with their lights flashing, painting the concrete walls in streaks of red and blue. 4 officers got out, hands on their weapons, flashlights cutting through the dim lighting of the third level. Raymond kept me behind him the entire time. I couldn't stop shaking. My legs felt like they might give out at any moment, but I couldn't look away from my car. The shadow underneath hadn't moved since Raymond first spotted it. Whoever was under there was staying perfectly still, waiting to see what would happen next. One of the officers approached the vehicle slowly, his flashlight aimed at the ground. He crouched down about 10 feet away and shined the beam underneath. "Police, come out now with your hands where I can see them." Nothing happened for a long moment. Then, slowly, a figure began to move. 2 hands appeared first, pressing flat against the concrete, then arms, then a body, sliding out from under my car like something from a nightmare. When he stood up, I stopped breathing. It was Dustin. He was wearing dark clothes, a black hoodie and black jeans, the kind of outfit you wear when you don't want to be seen. On his hands were latex gloves, the thin kind doctors use, and in his right hand, catching the light from a dozen flashlights, was a hunting knife with a blade at least 6 inches long. The officers reacted immediately. They shouted commands, ordering him to drop the weapon, to get on the ground, to put his hands behind his head. Dustin didn't resist. He let the knife clatter to the concrete and lowered himself to his knees, then flat on his stomach. 2 officers moved in and handcuffed him while the others kept their weapons drawn. Through all of it, Dustin's eyes never left my face. He wasn't angry. He wasn't scared. He looked almost peaceful, like this was exactly how he expected things to go. Like seeing me watch him get arrested was part of the plan. That expression haunted me more than the knife. Once Dustin was secured in the back of a squad car, detectives arrived to process the scene. They asked me to wait while they searched his vehicle, a gray pickup truck parked 2 levels up. I sat on a concrete barrier near the stairwell, wrapped in a blanket someone had given me, while Raymond stood nearby like a guard who refused to leave his post. 30 minutes later, a detective named Hernandez came to talk to me. Her face was serious, and I knew before she said anything that whatever they found wasn't good. "Miss Brennan, do you know the man we arrested?" I nodded. "His name is Dustin Mercer. He's my ex-boyfriend. We broke up 8 months ago." She wrote something in her notebook. "When was the last time you had contact with him?" "About 7 months ago. He sent some text messages after I ended things, but then he stopped. I haven't heard from him since." "Detective." Hernandez looked at me for a long moment. "We searched his vehicle. I need to show you what we found." She led me to the second level where Dustin's truck was parked, now surrounded by crime scene tape. The passenger door was open, and I could see the contents spread across the seats and floor. Rope, duct tape, zip ties, a roll of plastic sheeting, a change of clothes in a gym bag, and a printed map with my apartment address circled in red marker. My knees buckled. Raymond caught my arm before I hit the ground. "There's more," Detective Hernandez said gently. "We found a notebook in the glove compartment. It contains detailed notes about your daily routine, what time you arrive at work, what time you leave, which route you drive home, what you wear, what car you drive, He's been documenting your movements for at least 6 weeks. 6 weeks. For 6 weeks, Dustin had been following me, watching me, learning everything about my life, and I had no idea. Except that wasn't entirely true, was it? I thought back over the past month and a half, searching my memory for signs I had ignored. The feeling of being watched when I walked to my car. The unfamiliar vehicle I had noticed in my apartment complex parking lot more than once. The hang-up calls from unknown numbers that I assumed were spam. The night I thought I saw someone standing across the street from my building, just a silhouette in the darkness, watching my window. I had noticed all of those things. I had felt the wrongness of them in my gut, but I had talked myself out of every single one. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself Dustin had moved on. I told myself that things like this didn't happen to people like me. I was wrong about all of it. Detective Hernandez explained what they believed Dustin was planning. He had positioned himself under my car, waiting for me to approach. When I unlocked the door and started to get in, he would have grabbed me from behind. The knife was to control me, to keep me from fighting back. The supplies in his truck were to transport me somewhere else, somewhere private, somewhere no one would hear me scream. She didn't say what would have happened after that. She didn't need to. The look in her eyes told me everything. I asked her one more question. How did Raymond know to check under my car? She glanced over at the older man still standing protectively nearby. He said he noticed someone suspicious earlier in the evening. A man walking through the garage without a parking pass, looking at cars, but never getting into one. Mr. Gibbs watched him for a while, then lost track of him. When you came down to leave, he had a gut feeling something was wrong. Raymond's gut feeling saved my life. His instincts caught what I had missed for 6 weeks. And Dustin was now in handcuffs because a parking attendant refused to ignore what didn't feel right. The police arrested Dustin that night on charges of stalking, criminal harassment, and attempted kidnapping. I gave my statement to Detective Hernandez, answered every question she asked, and signed the paperwork she put in front of me. By the time I finally left the parking garage, it was almost midnight. Raymond walked me to my car, which had been cleared by the forensics team, and watched me drive away. I made it 2 blocks before I had to pull over because I was crying too hard to see the road. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. The thought of walking into my apartment alone, knowing that Dustin had been watching me for weeks, knowing he had circled my address on a map, made me physically sick. I drove to a hotel near the airport and paid for a room with cash. I sat on the bed with every light on, staring at the door, jumping at every sound in the hallway. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I called my sister Marin in Chicago. I told her everything, starting from the breakup 8 months ago and ending with what happened in the garage. She was on a plane by noon. She stayed with me for the next week, sleeping on my couch, making sure I ate, holding me when the nightmares woke me up at 3 in the morning. But fear wasn't the only thing I felt during those days. Somewhere beneath the terror and the shock, something else was growing. Anger. I was angry at Dustin for turning me into a victim. I was angry at myself for ignoring the warning signs. And I was angry at the thought that he might somehow get away with this. I knew how these cases worked. I had read enough news stories to know that stalking charges often got reduced or dismissed. I knew that restraining orders were just pieces of paper. I knew that Dustin's lawyer would try to spin some story about how he never intended to hurt me, how the knife was for self-defense, how the supplies in his truck were for something innocent. I refused to let that happen. I called the prosecutor's office and asked to speak with whoever was handling my case. They connected me with District Attorney Connie Reyes, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense voice. I told her I wanted to help in any way I could. I told her I had evidence, documentation, witnesses. I told her I would do whatever it took to make sure Dustin was convicted. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Good, because cases like this are harder to prove than people think. I need you to be strong, Miss Brennan. I need you to be thorough, and I need you to be ready to testify." I told her I was ready. Over the next 2 weeks, I became obsessed with building the case against Dustin. I went through my phone and saved every text message he had ever sent me, especially the ones from after the breakup. Some were pleading, some were angry, One said that I would regret leaving him. I printed them all out and organized them by date. I dug through old photos on my computer and found pictures I had taken months ago without really thinking about why. Dustin's car parked outside my apartment complex when he shouldn't have been there. A figure standing across the street from my building late at night. Shadows I had captured because something felt wrong, even if I couldn't name what it was at the time. I reached out to people who could corroborate my story. My co-worker Janelle remembered me mentioning that I felt like someone was following me. She agreed to give a statement. My neighbor Gloria, an older woman who lived 2 doors down from me, told the prosecutor that she had seen a man matching Dustin's description walking through our apartment complex several times over the past month. She had thought he was visiting someone. Now she knew better. My sister Marin confirmed the phone calls I had made to her over the past year, crying, scared, worried that Dustin wouldn't leave me alone. She remembered specific conversations, specific dates, specific things I had said. The prosecutor assembled all of it into a timeline that showed exactly what Dustin had done, the escalating behavior during our relationship, the refusal to accept the breakup, the months of surveillance, the detailed planning, the attack that was only stopped because a parking attendant trusted his instincts. I spent hours preparing for my testimony. The prosecutor warned me that Dustin's lawyer would try to make me look unstable, emotional, unreliable. She told me to stay calm, to stick to the facts, to answer only the question that was asked and nothing more. I practiced in front of the mirror. I practiced with Marin. I practiced until I could tell my story without my voice breaking. Somewhere in the middle of all that preparation, something shifted inside me. I stopped feeling like a victim. I stopped feeling helpless. For the first time since that night in the garage, I felt like I had power. Dustin had tried to take control of my life. He had followed me, watched me, planned to hurt me in ways I couldn't let myself imagine. But he didn't get to decide how this story ended. I did. Dustin pleaded not guilty. His lawyer stood in front of the judge and painted a picture of a misunderstood man who had made poor decisions out of love. He called it a misunderstanding. He said Dustin had only wanted to talk to me, to get closure, to explain his feelings one more time. The knife was for personal protection because Dustin was nervous about approaching me. The supplies in his truck were for a camping trip he had planned with friends. There was no intent to harm. There was no plan to kidnap. Just a heartbroken man who had gone about things the wrong way. I sat in the gallery and listened to every word. Dustin was at the defense table in a clean navy suit, his hair neatly combed, looking nothing like the man in dark clothes who had crawled out from under my car with a weapon in his gloved hand. He looked calm, respectable, the kind of guy you might pass on the street without a second thought. That was the scariest part. How normal he looked. How easily he could convince a jury that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. When the prosecutor called me to testify, my heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. I walked to the witness stand on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. I raised my right hand and swore to tell the truth. Then I sat down, looked at the jury, and began. I told them everything. I started with the beginning of our relationship, how charming Dustin had been, how attentive, how perfect he seemed. Then I described how things changed, the jealousy, the controlling behavior, the way he monitored my phone and questioned me whenever I spent time with anyone else. I told them about the night I finally ended things and the relief I felt when I walked away. Then I told them about what came after, the 2 times he showed up at my apartment, the text messages that swung between desperate and threatening, the feeling of being watched that I couldn't shake for months, the strange car in my parking lot, the figure standing across the street from my building at night. All the signs I noticed but talked myself out of because I wanted to believe he had moved on. I told them about the night in the parking garage, about Raymond stopping me, about seeing Dustin crawl out from under my car with a knife in his hand, about the way he looked at me as the officers pinned him to the ground, calm and satisfied, like he had been waiting for that moment for a long time. My voice cracked once when I described the supplies the police found in his truck, the rope, the duct tape, the plastic sheeting, the map with my address circled in red. I paused to take a breath, and when I continued, my voice was steady again. I finished by looking directly at the jury. I don't know what would have happened if the parking attendant hadn't stopped me, but I know what Dustin was prepared to do. He had been planning this for 6 weeks. He knew my schedule better than I did, and he was waiting under my car with a knife, wearing gloves, parked 2 floors away, so no one would connect him to me. That is not a misunderstanding. That is not a man who just wanted to talk. Dustin's lawyer cross-examined me for almost an hour. She asked why I never filed a police report after the breakup. I told her that I thought I was overreacting, that I had been taught to give people second chances, that I wanted to believe someone I had loved wouldn't really hurt me. She asked if I had any proof that Dustin intended to harm me beyond the items found in his truck. I said the knife in his hand while he waited under my car seemed like proof enough. She tried to twist my words. She tried to make me seem emotional and unreliable, but I stuck to the facts. Just like the prosecutor had taught me, I answered only what was asked. I didn't let her rattle me. When I stepped down from the witness stand, my legs were shaking, but I held my head high. I had done everything I could. The rest was up to the jury. They deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they filed back into the courtroom, I grabbed my sister's hand and held it so tight I thought I might break her fingers. The 4-person stood and read the verdict. Guilty of stalking, guilty of criminal harassment, guilty of attempted kidnapping. I heard Marin gasp beside me. I heard someone in the gallery start crying, but I couldn't make a sound. I just sat there, frozen, watching Dustin's face as the words sank in. For the first time since I had known him, he lost control. His calm expression cracked. His jaw tightened. He turned and looked at me with pure hatred, the mask finally slipping away to reveal what had always been underneath. I held his gaze without flinching. 2 weeks later, Dustin was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The judge called his actions premeditated and predatory. She said the evidence left no doubt that he intended to cause serious harm. As the bailiff led him out of the courtroom in handcuffs, Dustin turned and looked at me one last time. I watched until the door closed behind him. Then I let myself breathe. The day after Dustin was sentenced, I took a leave of absence from work. My boss was understanding about it. Everyone at the office had heard what happened by then. Some of them had even testified. Janelle hugged me in the break room and told me to take all the time I needed. I promised I would come back when I was ready, but I honestly didn't know when that would be. I spent the first week at my sister's house in Chicago. Marin didn't push me to talk about anything. She just let me exist in her guest room, playing with my nieces when I had the energy, sitting quietly when I didn't. Her husband cooked big dinners every night, and we ate together as a family. I had forgotten what that felt like, being surrounded by people who loved me without expecting anything in return. My parents flew up from Florida to see me. My mother cried when she hugged me at the airport. My father, who never talked about feelings, held my hand for a long time without saying anything. That silence meant more than any words could have. When I finally went back to Milwaukee, I started seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma from stalking and intimate partner violence. Her name was Dr. Rena Walsh, and she helped me understand things I had been struggling to put into words. She explained that what I was feeling, the hypervigilance, the nightmares, the way I flinched at unexpected sounds, was a normal response to what I had been through. She told me that healing wasn't a straight line, that there would be good days and bad days, and that both were part of the process. She was right. Some mornings I woke up feeling almost normal. Other nights I lay awake for hours, listening to every creak in my apartment, convinced that someone was outside my window. But slowly, week by week, the bad days became less frequent. The nightmares started to fade. I began to feel like myself again, or at least a version of myself that had survived something terrible and come out the other side. A month after the trial ended, I went back to the parking garage on Morrison Street. I needed to see Raymond. He was there, just like always, standing near the entrance in his uniform, waving at cars as they pulled in and out. When he saw me walking toward him, his face broke into a wide smile. "Miss Brennan, it's good to see you." I handed him a card I had written myself and a gift certificate to a steakhouse I had heard he liked. I had to ask around to find out his favorite restaurant. He opened the card, read it slowly, and when he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "Yes, I did. You saved my life, Raymond. If you hadn't stopped me that night, I don't know what would have happened." He shook his head. "I just did what anyone would do." "That's not true," I said. "Most people don't pay attention. Most people don't trust their gut when something feels wrong. You did, and because of that, I'm still here." He didn't say anything else. He just nodded and tucked the card into his pocket. But when I turned to leave, he called after me. "You drive safe now, Miss Brennan." I smiled. "I will." In the months that followed, I started speaking publicly about what happened to me. It began small, just a local women's safety event where I shared my story with about 50 people. But word spread, and soon I was being invited to conferences and community gatherings and college campuses. I talked about the signs of stalking that I had missed. I talked about trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. I talked about documenting everything, even when you think you're overreacting, because that evidence might save your life someday. I'm not the same person I was before that night in the garage. I'm more cautious now. I check my surroundings when I walk to my car. I lock my doors the moment I get inside. I pay attention to the people around me in a way I never did before. But I'm also stronger. I know now that I can face the worst thing I've ever experienced and survive it. I know that I have people who love me and will show up when I need them. And I know that my voice matters, that telling my story might help someone else recognize danger before it's too late. Dustin will be in prison for at least 10 more years. After that, I don't know what happens. Maybe he gets out and moves on with his life. Maybe he finds someone else to obsess over. That thought used to keep me up at night, but it doesn't anymore. I can't control what he does when he's released. I can only control how I live my life now, and I choose to live it without fear. The man who wanted to hurt me is behind bars, but the person who saved me wasn't a police officer or a detective. It was a parking attendant named Raymond who noticed something wrong and refused to look away. He trusted his instincts when I had stopped trusting mine. He paid attention when it mattered most. Sometimes the people who change your life are the ones you least expect. If you want more stories, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from.